This is Rummy's Corner. Joe Louis is the featured boxer in this edition of the Top 5 Notable Wins series. And with Louis, he still holds the all-time record for heavyweight title defenses. The Brown Bomber's reign as heavyweight champion lasted from 1937 until 1948. So there are an awful lot of fights to choose from here, and I'm sure there will be some disagreement over which 5 are the most notable victories for Joe Louis. But let's go through a quick chronology of what I consider to be the top 5 notable wins during the long and illustrious career of the great Joe Louis. On September 24th, 1935, at Yankee Stadium in the Bronx, New York, undefeated up-and-coming heavyweight contender Joe Louis squared off against former heavyweight world champion Max Baer. Things began with both boxers having a customary feeling-out process, but before long, Louis opened up with a crisp combination that found the mark on the former champ. Baer was trying to figure Louis out, but Joe was controlling the action with a steady jab. Baer tried opening up with a wild flurry, but Louis remained calm under fire, and he soon began firing back with quick clubbing shots and impeccable accuracy. The opening round ended with Louis methodically battering Baer in the corner. Louis continued commanding the action with a solid jab and good footwork. Despite being the bigger man, Baer was unable to utilize his size to his advantage. Louis was carving him up with the left and sneaking in some hooks and lead rights for good measure whenever the opening surfaced. Joe Louis was simply too fast, too skilled, and too accurate for the former heavyweight champion. Louis unloaded with a barrage of heavy thudding shots in the third that overwhelmed Baer, who was ultimately dropped by a crunching right hand. Baer beat the count, but he looked badly dazed, and Joe's follow-up attack was something truly fierce. Baer soon found himself on the canvas again, and he was saved by the bell to end the third round. But he wasn't saved for long. Louis began the fourth with a piston-like jab, and nothing Baer did could deter Louis and his pinpoint precision. Louis started mixing in some wicked body shots into his methodical attacks, and Baer didn't seem to care for that. Before long, Louis landed a booming overhand right that he followed with a quick left hand, and Baer was down again. And this time, Max would not be getting up. It was an impressive fourth-round knockout for the 21-year-old Joe Louis. On June 22, 1937, at Comiskey Park in Chicago, Illinois, heavyweight world champion James J. Braddock put his title on the line against challenger Joe Louis. Things began with both boxers slugging it out in tight quarters, but it soon became a tactical battle at range with both men looking to gauge their distance. Louis went on the attack, and Braddock caught him with a quick counter that dropped the challenger. The Brown Bomber quickly rose, and Braddock moved in with his follow-up attack, but Louis quickly neutralized the champion's efforts. In round 2, there was a lot of feinting and tactical maneuvering as Braddock and Louis were both studying each other's reactions. Towards the end of the second, Louis started popping his jab out more efficiently, and this enabled him to begin opening up more offensively. Things evolved into what mostly amounted to a tactical affair, where both Braddock and Louis were looking to establish superiority from the outside. But this tactical rhythm was frequently interrupted by quick explosive spells. Louis was generally having the better moments, but the champion was rugged and crafty, and Braddock was landing some well-placed punches of his own, with the two sometimes trading away in the ebb and flow of the contest. In round 6, Louis opened up with a lengthy barrage of punches, many of which nailed the champion right on the button. Louis was finding his openings, and Braddock was having more and more difficulty fending Joe off. To his credit, Braddock continued trying, but Louis was having an easier time anticipating Braddock's next move. By round 8, Braddock was looking mighty confused, and Louis threw a left to the body which perfectly set up a monster right upstairs that dropped the champion. Braddock was down, and he was counted out by referee Tommy Thomas. Joe Louis had just become the new heavyweight champion of the world. On June 22, 1938, at Yankee Stadium in the Bronx, New York, heavyweight world champion Joe Louis put his title on the line against former heavyweight champion and former conqueror Max Schmeling. When the two had first met just a little over 2 years earlier, Schmeling had scored a 12th round knockout that shook up the heavyweight landscape. This bout afforded Louis the opportunity to settle unfinished business in a mega fight that took on international significance. Things began with Louis snapping off his jab, and before long, Louis charged in with a leaping left hook and followed it up with some clubbing rights and lefts. The Brown Bomber was throwing with ill intent, and when the two reverted back to center ring, Schmeling seemed unsure of himself. He countered a Louis jab, and then Max slowly began retreating towards the ropes. Schmeling tried charging Joe, but Louis started unloading some short, heavy shots on the inside. As the two were maneuvering for position, Louis fired off another 2 shots upstairs, and he soon nailed Max again with another crisp right. Louis then caught Schmeling with an explosive right followed by some menacing body shots. The Brown Bomber was ripping away, and Schmeling was hurt caught up against the ropes. Referee Arthur Donovan reset the action, and then Joe nailed Max with a 1-2 that sent Schmeling down. Schmeling got up on wobbly legs, and Louis attacked and soon dropped him again. Schmeling again made it to his feet, but a terrific body shot followed by a dynamite right had Schmeling down for the 3rd time. The fight was over. It was an absolutely ferocious display of power from Joe Louis. The Brown Bomber, cool as an assassin indeed. On June 18, 1941, at the Polo Grounds in New York, New York, heavyweight world champion Joe Louis put his title on the line against former light heavyweight world champion Billy Conn. The fight began with Conn up on his toes, and right from the onset, Conn's faster feet were dictating the range and tempo of the fight. Conn's game plan became quickly apparent. He was looking to stick and move and stay out of harm's way. Whenever Louis got in range, he would try to unload, but for the most part, Conn was making for a very tricky target. Conn was slippery, and he was elusive enough that he could usually slide away before Louis could clip him with something devastating. Conn's strategy began paying dividends, and the champion was having a lot of difficulties coping with Conn's speed and movement. Conn had Louis off balance during many of his attacks, and the fleet-footed Conn was able to dictate the distance to his liking more often than not. And whenever Louis did catch him with something decent, Conn proved to have a sturdy chin while maintaining focus. Even when Louis was landing lethal shots to the body, Conn was absorbing them well and proving to be extremely durable. As things progressed into the later rounds, Conn continued doing the better work, as he was sticking and moving on the outside, circling around, and maneuvering his way around punches on the inside. In round 12, Conn staggered Louis with a series of brutal shots both upstairs and down, and the champion appeared hurt and fatigued as Conn tried to press his advantage. In round 13, Louis doubled up the jab and landed a big right hand that appeared to have gotten Conn's attention. Louis pressed on, and he landed another combination that buckled Conn's legs. And then out of nowhere, fireworks erupted with both boxers slugging it out. After things settled down briefly, a booming overhand right from the champion staggered Conn again. Louis followed up methodically, and he focused his attention downstairs with a couple of brutal body shots before mixing in some serious uppercuts for good measure. Without rushing matters, Louis began unloading bombs at a steady, measured pace, and these punches were visibly affecting the smaller challenger. Conn was absorbing a lot of punishment until he was ultimately overwhelmed by the onslaught from the Brown Bomber. The game challenger ultimately slumped down face first. Conn made it to his feet, but it was too late. The fight was over. Entering the 13th round, Conn had been ahead on 2 of the 3 judges' scorecards, but Joe Louis had just scored a dramatic 13th round knockout. On June 25, 1948, at Yankee Stadium in the Bronx, New York, heavyweight world champion Joe Louis put his title on the line in an immediate rematch against Jersey Joe Walcott. Louis had been awarded a controversial split decision when the two first met in December of the previous year, where the majority of ringside boxing writers scored the fight for Walcott. Things began with a lot of posturing and feinting as both boxers were looking to become reacquainted. Jersey Joe was making use of his trademark unorthodox movement, and Louis was patiently stalking while remaining mindful of Jersey Joe's quick hands. It became a textbook battle of 2 counterpunchers, each being reluctant to lead. Jersey Joe's quicker feet and faster hands appeared to give him the edge early on. In the 3rd round, Walcott landed a crushing counter right that dropped the champion. Louis quickly rose to his feet, and Walcott was patient and measured without trying to overplay his advantage. As the action progressed, Louis was having a lot of difficulty coping with Jersey Joe's outright awkwardness, as Walcott continued patiently trying to lure Louis into something big. Walcott was sometimes making use of his fast jab, and he was moving around very well with a great understanding of his optimal range. At times, Louis was closing the distance and trying to fire off shots, but Louis wasn't being especially effective with his offense. Jersey Joe's mesmerizing movement was quickly becoming the story of the fight, and whenever Louis was having any spots of success, they were usually short-lived and frequently interrupted by a crisp Walcott counter. In round 11, Walcott continued to control the action, and he was constantly changing his angles with all types of movement, until suddenly, Louis drilled him with a big looping right. Jersey Joe reacted to this with a delayed stagger, and the champion tried to pounce on this opportunity to seize the momentum. Louis had Walcott up against the ropes, and he began unloading as Jersey Joe was twisting and turning, and slipping and sliding, and firing back whenever he could. But Louis was digging down deep, and he was firing away with everything he had until the challenger went tumbling down. And he appeared very dazed as he desperately tried crawling his way back to his feet. But he didn't make it in time, and the fight was over. It was a dramatic 11th round knockout in what was ultimately the 25th and final title defense in the long and illustrious career of the Brown Bomber. If I had to rank these 5 victories, number 1 is obviously the first round destruction of former conqueror Max Schmeling. Louis took care of his unfinished business there, avenging his only career loss to that point, and he did so in such devastating style on the biggest global stage imaginable. Number 2 for me would be the come-from-behind victory against Jersey Joe. The dramatic nature of the late round stoppage, with an older Joe Louis clearly past his best, that was truly a fairy tale ending for Joe Louis's title reign. The type of stuff that Hollywood movies are made from. Truly inspiring stuff in that one. Number 3 for me would be the victory against Billy Conn in their first fight, where despite struggling for the majority of the contest, Louis showed the true heart of a champion when he rallied late against a tough and frustrating foe. Number 4, I would go with when Louis first won the title against J Braddock. That was another solid win for Louis, and even though Braddock is generally considered one of the weaker champions in heavyweight history, he was a game-tough fighter who was clever and crafty, and he was there to win. And number 5 for me, that victory against Max Baer when a young Joe Louis was working his way up towards title contention. I've always thought this was a shining example of the type of destructive force Louis could be even before he had fully matured as a boxer and reached his best. With the long and illustrious career of the Brown Bomber, these 5 victories alone in no way, shape, or form tell the entire story of his greatness as a boxer, as a champion, or as a human being. But for what it's worth, these were the 5 victories that personally stand out for me as the 5 most notable wins in the incredible career of Joe Louis. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed, and have a great night.